growing up, did you always want to be a jockey, or was there something else you could have seen yourself doing?
I didn't really know that much about racing, if I'm honest, until I was 13. My dad was a mechanic, and he used to fix cars and do services for people that, in a garage that we had at home. So this guy came, we had a pony that I was riding that was quite difficult, and he obviously watched me ride it, and he said he can obviously ride. Does he want to... We're looking for somebody to do weekend work at a local racing yard. And my dad said to me, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd do anything to make a few quid and anything to do something with horses." So off I went. And honestly, the people say about moments that define your life and your career. Well, the very first time I sat on a racehorse and rode at a canter, it was a game changer. From that moment on, I thought this is going to be my life. And I suppose in that way, I was very lucky. There's an awful lot of people who, have done their A-levels or have gone to university, got a degree, and still don't know what they're going to do. Whereas I was very fortunate, from that moment on, I knew that I wanted to be a jockey.
That's amazing. So you knew, and then it happened.
Well, not quite as quickly as that, but yeah, I knew, and it was just a case of sticking with it, and I suppose being a bit numb and perseverance. The one thing I would say to anybody, you've got to back yourself, because you want everybody else to get a little bit of that self-belief that you've got and believe in you. So, that's the one thing. I know very often you have times, it doesn't matter what job you do. I see it all the time in the broadcasting world that I'm in now. If at first you don't succeed, just keep trying, keep improving, keep getting better. But the only thing I would always say to everybody, be prepared when you meet somebody for the first time. Be prepared to put on a show, because that impression that you leave on somebody the first time they see you will last. And if that impression is a bad one, it's very, very difficult to shake it off. So, prepare yourself well and give it everything you've got, and that way, you'll hold your head up high. So,
would you say that where you were so focused and driven, you had your eye on the prize, essentially?
Yeah, there was. I was, but I had that goal. I had that thing that I was always working towards, and it's a funny old thing, really, riding, because you start off, you want to get a ride in a race. Yeah. Once you get a ride in a race, you want to get another ride in a race. Then you want to get another ride. And all the time you're thinking about, yes, winning would be great, but it's actually the fact that you're riding is a big thing. But then once you've had a few rides and you've finished placed a few times, you want to ride a winner. And then that takes over your life. And that is, as a jockey, you are driven by a need for success. And it is like a drug. Like that adrenaline fix that you get when you ride a winner, it makes you almost a junkie, because you need that fix. Otherwise, you're disappointed all the time. And that's what makes it tough.
Keeps you going. Yeah.
You're living on, like, when I gave up and then had to actually work for a living, I was tired all the time and felt like I had no energy. Yeah. And I went to see somebody about it, and they said, well, of course you haven't, because when you were riding, you were living on adrenaline all the time. Wow. Whereas now you don't have that same buzz.
Yeah, I suppose it's completely different. Well, I was going to go on to my next question, but since you said, about the change in your career, I'm going to go on to my question. So how did you find the transition from racing to then suddenly having to get into television? So obviously being completely different.
Yeah, I was fortunate in many ways, and I'd done a few days with Channel 4, who had the contract then. I'd also done a couple of days with the BBC. And I just started to get a contract with At the Races, doing some blogs for them. I'd agreed to do a few days for them when I wasn't working. So it was almost like I was preparing myself for the transition a little bit. And that's where racing has changed an awful lot. We've got a system in place now called JETS, which is the Jockeys Employment Training Scheme. And it's almost preparing jockeys for the inevitable when you retire. Whereas in the old days, say in the 90s and the noughties, if you were preparing for your next career, people thought you didn't have your eye on the prize, that you were thinking ahead all the time. Now, it's almost a given. There is nothing wrong with preparing yourself for something that will happen. It's not like something that might happen. It will happen. You will not be able to ride forever.
Yeah.
So that's where that Lisa Delaney, all the people who have helped set Jets up, they've done a fantastic job. And it's something that a lot of jockeys utilise now. And they've had quite an uptake in it. Obviously, because at the moment people are on lockdown, a lot of them weren't riding. There's no sign of jump racing returning until before the 1st of July. So for a lot of the jump lads, they've got an opportunity to use that time to try and get another skill.
So before the times, say in the 90s, when a jockey retires, what would happen? Would they, would it just be kind of working on yards or?
Yeah, for some of them, yes. And for others, they'd go completely left field. And, you've seen instances of a few of them becoming estate agents, all the old thing. It's almost like old footballers, They buy pubs and then go skint and, that sort of thing. So there was all sorts. But the media side of things has become a popular avenue for jockeys now. And why not? Like in the old days, there wasn't an At the Races channel, there wasn't a racing TV, there wasn't a Sky Sports Racing like there is now. So, all of that has changed. There was only, if there was racing on the TV, it might be on the BBC on the weekend or it might be on Channel 4. There wasn't. Every race is shown live now. So there is an avenue for ex-jockeys or for form analysts to go down.
It's amazing how it's all changed, because I remember when I was younger and my granddad would watch the races and I'd sit there with him and watch it, whereas now it's quite cool because, you can go and see the stables or, it's so much different. So I'm going to go back to my second question.
Yeah.
So what is a jockey's routine on a race day and then not on a race day?
Yeah, on a race day, it would vary really. For me, when I was riding, I would ride out for Nicky Henderson 4 mornings a week or 3 mornings a week sometimes. So if it was, say, a Saturday, on a Saturday morning, I would always ride work. So I would be up at before 7. I'd ride out. I'd be finished at Nicky Henderson's at 9 o'clock maybe or 9:15. I'd come home, depending on the time of the year. If it's early winter time, like November, you don't have that much time because there isn't much daylight, so the races start earlier. So you might have to just go straight from there to the race course. Or if it was a little bit later and say the first race wasn't until 2:30, then you would have time to come home. I would always have a sweat before going racing because I always struggle a little bit with my weight. So I would normally have to knock off 3-4 pounds every morning. And then get in the car, drive to the races and ride.
If it wasn't a race day, do you have rest days or?
Yeah, on a Wednesday was normally my rest day. I normally took Wednesdays off because it's a quiet day at Henderson's. So on a Wednesday, I would get up at my leisure. Before I had children, that might be like 8 a.m. Get up, have a look through the day's racing. And then head off to the races at whatever time suits me. But if I wasn't riding, I would just relax. And then I'll have organised something that I'd always, if I have a day off, I'd always like to go and try play golf because it was the one thing that I found got me away from it. So it was my escape, really.
Yeah. And is that 1 day off a week or 2?
Yeah, I would normally, in my latter years, I always tried to have 1 day off a week. Okay. But very often that wouldn't be the case because if you were busy, you'd be riding every single day.
Yeah.
I like some guys will go maybe 45 days in a row with no break.
Wow. Okay.
And sometimes more.
Yeah.
Because they're riding every single day. There is no days off.
No. I just truly believe that when it's your passion, you don't really need a day off, do you, really? Because you enjoy it, so...
Well, no, but it's funny. It's a tough one, because if you're riding and things are going well, it's easy. But if you're riding and things are going badly and you're having a bad run, then it feels like hard work. It's a bit like you see a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah.
He has to actually step off the wheel. But as long as he's on the wheel, he's got to keep going round. And that's how it works in racing. when you're on that roundabout, there's no stopping. No. You're basically riding every day. You've got to deliver the goods each day. And what happened yesterday is yesterday. It's all about today. What happened, results are gone. You've got to focus on the next race.
Yeah, so it's kind of like every day is like a refresh, and then you just have to get back
it's
in
a new day.
Okay.
Yeah, you can be flying. Like, you wake up in the morning after having a good day yesterday and you feel like you're King Kong. Go out and ride in the first race and get beat on something that should have won. You ain't King Kong anymore.
No. Okay, how do jockeys make their weight?
Well, I've let you in on that a little bit. Yeah. I used to sit in the bath, and it would depend. If I was doing, like, my light weights were like 10.5 was my minimum in the end. So for me to do 10.5, I would have to have a sweat in the evening, which would knock 3 or 4 off, and then I'd sweat another 2 or 3 off in the morning of the races. So that would mean 2 hours in the bath, sweating. Wow. Which would probably knock about 6 off.
Oh, really?
Maybe maybe 7, yeah. And like on other days, if you were a bit porky, you might have to lose a bit more. So, like, my body became accustomed to it almost, and it was the very same. When I'd be sitting on the side of the bath just about to get in, and I'd be sweating already. So, my body kind of knew what was happening. And it's a funny one because I've been retired 11 years.
Yeah.
I haven't had a bath in 11 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, you were sick of it by then.
Yeah, baths aren't for me anymore. I associate baths with sweating.
Yeah. Showers all the way.
Happy. Yeah, all the way.
Okay. So did you have like a special diet? Did you have to follow, or?
Yeah. Was it... I was very careful and quite strict. Didn't eat any pasta. Yeah. No potatoes. It was a lot of protein, not a lot of carbohydrate.
Did you find you got quite lightheaded because you weren't having so many carbs?
No, I didn't. It's funny how your body adjusts and it becomes accustomed to it.
Yeah.
My body was used to, the way that I fed it, and it seemed to function absolutely perfectly on it. I'm sure there's no doubt now they have a really good system in place for the jockeys where they can go up to John Moores University in Liverpool, sit down, have a consultation with a proper qualified dietitian.
Yeah.
They can map out a plan for you, and like, people have realised that if you do it properly, get all the right nutrients into your body, it can prolong your career and it can make you perform better. But when I was getting going, it was basically trial and error, and that worked for you, that didn't. I tried every diet there was.
Oh, really?
Because I was desperate to try and lose weight. So I can probably empathise with an awful lot of people who, go to Weight Watchers or have tried all the new diets that come out. I've tried them all.
Because I've tried a few diets, and it does, it mucks up your way of thinking sometimes. I find, I'd be angry, and I'm thinking, it's because I'm hungry. So did you find that too? You'd get mood swings maybe, or?
Yeah, I in the end, I normally only ate once a day in the evening, which is totally the wrong way to do it, I know. But when I come home from racing, I would have my evening meal. And I would have very little during the day. I might have just a few, energy snacks, which would, tide me over. But if you tried to stop me before I'd had my dinner, I would probably bite your head off.
Yeah, you needed that food.
Yeah, I wanted it. But it's a different way of life, and it is one that jockeys become used to.
Yeah, like you said, your body ends up becoming accustomed to it and you're used to it. Well, did you ever have a problem with water weight? So did you have to drink more water to then, when it sweated out, or not a lot of water? Or?
Yeah, that was the obvious problem for me, because I was dehydrating myself all the time. You have to be careful about taking on too much water, because your body is like a sponge.
Yeah.
So if you deprive it of water and then give it loads, it'll just hold on to it because it thinks, right, well, he's not flushing his system out properly. So it was a very, very bad way of doing things. And it's not healthy and it's not good for you. And so many lads now are better prepared than we ever were.
Yeah.
So, I think because they've got that dietitian in place and that facility for jockeys, they're an awful lot better prepared than we ever were.
I try and drink 3 litres of water a day. If I drink I end up putting on more Waterway. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a funny anecdote from your career that stands out to you?
Well, I think one of the ones really, we went to Adrian Maguire, who was a very, very good jockey, and really unlucky not to be champion one year when Richard Dunwoody beat him. Him and I were going to Aintree, and it was the Beecher Chase meeting where you have 2 races over the Grand National fences and quite a few races around the Mile May course. So there was a mate of ours called Johnny Cadna, who I shared a house with in Lambo when I worked for Nicky Henderson. And Johnny had a broken leg. And of course, when you break your leg, and he broke his thigh, which means you're off for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's quite tedious and boring for him. So we asked him, did he want to come for the drive? So like it's 3 hours to Liverpool. So he came with us and we were chatting away, and like we were all very good friends. So we had a really good laugh on the way up. Get to the races. Johnny goes in. He's, looking after himself. He comes into the weighing room. He's having a little bit of physio. And just having a nice time, really. So Adrian and I both go out to ride in the 2 races over the Grand National fences. And we both end up having 2 falls each.
Okay.
So we both fall in both of the races over the national fences.
Yeah. And
both of us pick up injuries. So we're like crippled, the 2 of us. Like I've hurt my back, and then I got kicked on the arm as well, which had blown up.
Yeah.
Adrian had been kicked in the back as well, so he was lying flat out on the back seat in the car. Neither of us could drive, and Johnny Cadna had to drive the car with a broken leg.
Oh my goodness!
So we drove back from Liverpool with a disabled driver in the front, basically driving the car. So that is definitely not one I would recommend. But we got home.
Well, that's good.
Thankfully.
I assume it wasn't an automatic car then.
It was automatic, actually.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So
then.
that wasn't so bad. But Johnny hadn't quite worked out how to do everything with his left foot, and it was his right leg that was broken.
Oh, my goodness.
It was quite difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. What was the feeling like when you won the Grand National in 1996 on Rough Quest, apart, of course, from your famous quote?
Yes. It's a funny one, really, because there's a reason why I got carried away like I did and said what I did, and that was down to the fact that obviously Rough Quest was favourite, so there's quite a lot of pressure involved. You're riding Arsenal's favourite in the Grand National. You've never been round the National. Only had one ride in the race the previous year where I fell at the first, so there's, you have that element of doubt, I suppose. The horse had run once over the national fences before and fallen as well.
Okay.
So there was an awful lot of negatives and quite a few positives. So, but I was confident. Like, I thought the horse was a good thing. All I had to do was get him round and he would win.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that's exactly how the race panned out. And you couldn't have written the script better, except for the fact that I crossed over the other horse on the run to the line. And it was a steward's inquiry called. And of course, when I was walking back in, Terry Casey, who was the trainer, Terry is a great lad, but he could be quite dour. And he said to me, "We're going to lose it in the steward's room." So I was shitting myself, basically, thinking that I just won the national and then I was going to lose it. You then have a steward's inquiry where you walk into a steward's room in front of a panel of people. The 3 of them sat down in front of you. You sit across the table, and I'm stood up. They're saying, "All right, Mr. Fitzgerald, can you explain to us what happened?" So you explain. Then they show you the film on the 6 screens from every conceivable angle. Now, every time I look at the race, it gets worse watching it. And you're starting to panic. Like my hands were sweating and I was going white. Because basically I just thought I'm going to lose the race. And then thankfully then they ask you to go out, they deliberate between themselves, they invite you back in, you come back in and they say, "Right, gentlemen, the placings remain unaltered. So you've kept the race." I'm in shock.
Yeah.
So I get taken straight out in front of Des Lynam, and he says to me, and like Des Lynam he was like Mr. TV. And I can remember standing in front of him and looking at him and thinking, "You're a lot taller than I thought you'd be." Like, he's a big man, Des Lynam. And he said to me, Mick Fitzgerald, you've just won the Grand National. How does that feel? And I just looked at him like he was my best mate and said, Des, after that, even sex is an anticlimax. And, of course, when you work in TV, you've got an earpiece. You've got somebody talking to you all the time. Somebody must have said something to him because his eyes just flicked like that. And it's only now that I realise, like, if somebody says something like that, it is actually a bit of TV gold because it's like something you're not expecting.
Yeah.
And, I didn't plan it. It was just the way it happened.
Yeah, just in the moment.
Yeah, and that was it. And, people always ask me, do I regret it? And the answer is no.
No.
The Grand National is the world's greatest steeplechase.
Yeah.
And when you're a young jockey growing up, everybody knows about the Grand National. Even people who know nothing about horse racing will have heard of the Grand National. That is the enormity of what I had just achieved. So, yes, okay, I got carried away, but it's better to be known for that than to be never known at all.
Exactly. And did you find it quite surreal? Like, even the day after, were you still in shock?
Yes, of course you are, because you read all the newspapers, see all the pictures, get all the messages from people. It was amazing. Yeah. And the great thing is they can never take that off you. You will forever be known as a Grand National winning jockey.
Before you had won the race, how were you feeling? Were you just so... Was it almost sort of like tunnel vision? You were so in the zone, you were so focused, and then it just happened.
Yeah, it's a funny one. People always ask you about the crowd and are you aware of where you are, or, people screaming. You don't hear it.
No.
You really don't hear it. And even at Cheltenham, where there's 60,000 people there, you don't hear it. It's your brain is working differently, and it is very much like that tunnel vision. You're thinking about the job in hand as opposed to what is happening on the surroundings. So it's funny, and in the end, I think I can remember when I started riding first, everything happened so quickly. In the end, because you become so used to it, you can see things happening before they actually happen. And that's the difference. It's like footballers. You watch good ones, they look like they've got all the time in the world. Where, the guys who don't think about the game properly, they're the ones that look like the bees around the honey pot. They're all centred around the ball.
Did you have butterflies when you were going around the course? Was it almost...
No.
Quite relaxed?
No. Yeah, very.
Really?
Very. Because once you get out in the country, you're away from the crowd.
Yeah.
So you can't really feel it, and all you're thinking about is all the other things that are happening. It's like an ever-changing moment.
Yeah.
There's so many variables that you have to take into account all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're all the time working out what's the next stride going to be, where's that horse in front of me going to go, where's the horse on my left going to go, how well am I travelling, how far have I got left to go. You're basically like a mathematician. You're working out that equation all the way. Every furlong in a race, you're working out the maths. How much petrol have I got in the tank? How much can I afford to use here? Do I need to save to get me home? And they're all the questions that a jockey will ask themselves on the way around.
It's incredible, especially with the Grand National. Like you said, it's such an amazing, incredible feeling. I can imagine it was.
Yeah, but it's the great thing about the National is maybe it's not as bad as it used to be. But even if you're on the best horse, you could get brought down by something falling in front of you.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that you've got to take into account with the National. There is very much a luck element involved as well. You could be on the best horse and not get round. So, you just need that little bit of good fortune.
After your serious injuries, did this force you into your early retirement, or would you have carried on if you could?
Yes, basically when I had my injury, that was it. I had talked about retiring the previous year, but I had changed my diet. I was very comfortable in my home environment. I was very happy personally, and I was very happy professionally. The furthest thing from my mind was retiring.
Big change then.
Oh yeah, massive, because I could see what was coming at the Henderson Yard. We had a lot of nice young horses coming through.
Yeah.
And I was really looking forward to that.
Do you miss riding? I assume you do.
Every day. And like, you think it's 10 years down the line. I still miss it. Because one of the things with me is I can't actually ride, even for pleasure now, because of the injury that I had. I've got quite a lot of metal down both sides of my neck, which means that I can't really take a fall. So I have to be very careful. I can't ski or anything high impact. So, that I miss riding the horses, because it's like anything. If you're reasonably good at something and it's then taken away from you, it's quite difficult to swallow, because you try other things and you're nowhere near as good at it. Whereas when I was riding, I didn't have to think about it. I just did it, and it was easy. Whereas I find everything else very difficult.
Oh, really? You still work with Nicky Henderson, don't you?
Well, I go in and watch schooling on schooling mornings on a Thursday normally, because I've got a couple of young jockeys that I coach. So they're based there, so I go in and watch them and try and help them as best I can.
I know, like you said, you can't ride anymore, but at least you're still, involved. I'm
still involved. Yeah, it is, and I like Nicky. Yeah. He's he is a good man, and he's a very good person to know, because he's just a nice man, as well as being a very, very good trainer.
Yard's one of my favourites. So this is my last question. What have you been doing in lockdown? How have you been keeping yourself busy?
We're quite lucky here. We have a little yard in Lambourne, and we've got a dozen horses. A mixture really of race horses who are out of training at the moment. And we had another horse who was in pre-training. He was going back. And my wife does... she has her own horses as well. She buys and sells some eventers, competes them as well. And I've got 3 children, and 2 of them ride, 1 doesn't. So the 2 that ride have a collection of ponies as well, which need to be fed and mucked out and all that jazz. So we've been quite busy with the horses, and there's been a few little jobs that have needed doing around the place, which I've done. And the golf course has just opened last week.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So I'm back playing golf now as well.
Oh, that's all right then. So it hasn't been too... You've been quite busy.
Yeah, the great thing for us is we still have the horses, which still have to be fed and looked after each day. I think if I didn't have that, I would have gone mad. Yeah. I really would.
Because I'm in London at the moment, and a lot of my family are elderly, so I can't stay there. So I just have to pop down and visit and sort of just ride once, twice a week. So I just...
I honestly couldn't imagine not being able to... Like, the other day I was out there fixing some fencing, and I was just looking down, and all I could see was greenery and our house. Yeah. And I just thought, we're so lucky. There's so many people who don't have access to this, and it must seem so claustrophobic, especially when you're not allowed to do anything. Yeah. A lot of people are at home, and it's quite difficult for some people as well. So I count myself very fortunate.
Yeah, because a lot of places don't have gardens as well.
No, I know. It's awful.
I have a bonus question. This is from my mother.
Go on.
We go to Lambourne Open Day every year. So my mum says, do trainers like Paul Nicholls and others in the Southwest do open days too?
No, they don't, as a rule. But Paul Nicholls has had an open day. Okay. I don't know if he's got any plans to have another one. I know if he did, there would be an awful lot of people who would like to go. He has the owners group, which is a small syndicate, but they're not actually that small a syndicate. They're a big syndicate. I think they have open days for their members, which is, one way of doing it. And I think, some of the horses that they have, you can become a member of the owners group for as little as 57 quid, I think. So, that sort of thing is quite a nice way for people to go and have a look around the yard. But I know that's quite difficult, because with so many people involved in one horse, they have to limit the number of people who can actually come at one time. But I do know that some of them have had open days, but because they're not together, it's quite difficult to get. And Paul's place is you know, the road system around his yard is quite difficult, and I would think the village that he trains in, if that had any amount of cars, it would seize up. So I don't know, but I know he has had one in the past, and it's something that it's worth pushing, you know.
Yeah.
Because if he had an open day, there would be quite a lot of people who would quite happily give a tenner to charity to come and have a look round, because he's got, you know, it's quite nice to see different places and see how other people do it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll pass that on to her. She'll be pleased.
Yeah, do.
Well, that's all my questions. Lovely. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
No, not at all.
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.
Bye.